In June 2011, an unemployed man spent £57,000 in cash to fly 40 friends to Cancun for his wedding. Tanned and flanked by friends wearing identical shirts, Christopher Welsh Jr. smiled for the camera with his father. Neither man had ever filed tax returns. But the two men were the leaders of one of the largest drug trafficking gangs in the UK, a business that imported hundreds of millions of heroin and cocaine from Liverpool to Scotland under the noses of the authorities. Christopher Welsh Jr. grew up in Eastham on the Wirral, a part of Merseyside that is not rich but not poor either. He did not come from a well-known crime family. But by the time he was an adult, he had charted a course into serious organized crime and went on to build one of the most organized trafficking rings in recent British history. At its center was a father and son partnership. Welsh Sr., who headquartered his operation in Anfield, assisted in operating a tightly controlled network that was organized like the cartel groups. Their goal was not to create havoc, it was to succeed. Liverpool has long been an important center for drug sales. Its port is getting foreign shipments daily, including from Colombia, the Netherlands, and Belgium, all typical routes for cocaine into Europe. In the years that followed, the city's economy declined as industries left. That opened the door for gangs to take over, bringing money and status to areas hit by unemployment. In this regard, Welsh Jr. not only survived, he thrived. He developed a system to handle drug distribution. Suppliers in Liverpool shipped products through a chain of local distributors, logistics staff, storage managers, and trained delivery staff. The target market was Glasgow. What distinguished Welsh Jr. was the professionalism of his operation. Distribution points were spread around Liverpool, safe houses in Everton, Kirkdale, and Walton. These weren't dirty drug houses. Most were suburban houses rented or occupied through well-recommended contacts. Behind them, police later discovered kilo presses, packaging equipment, and imported cutting agents. Drugs were intentionally watered down, repackaged, and sealed in a manner that avoided detection and ensured purity. In one such safe house, police discovered a 10-ton hydraulic press and specially constructed steel molds to press heroin into identical blocks. These copied the methods used by Latin American cartels, a way to make the drugs look like clean, imported bulk shipments instead of local products. The heroin and cocaine, typically very pure, were cut with substances such as benzocaine in an effort to maximize the quantity. Dealers could turn each kilo of imported drugs into 3 or 4 kilos of product ready for the street. Alongside it was 2 kilograms of benzocaine, which could be cut to produce more than £160,000 worth of street value. The operation utilized trains to prevent stopping cars and being noticed on the streets. Couriers were instructed to dress well, act like ordinary commuters, and wear bags that appeared ordinary. Between September 2011 and October 2012, the police logged at least 111 journeys between Glasgow and Liverpool. Couriers like Liam Clotworthy frequently made journeys with 1 to 2 kilograms of Class A drugs per trip. To evade detection, the gang employed at least 43 disposable cellular phones, unregistered, often switched, and used only for basic communication. Each of the couriers received a number. When a run was made or compromised, the phone was disposed of and replaced. Orders were frequently communicated in coded messages or person to person. The gang didn't text and only used phones when absolutely necessary. At the top, Welsh Jr. was bold and methodical in his actions. He was called Pablo, not jokingly, but as a part of his persona. He styled himself after Escobar in how he ran things. He did not directly work on the drugs, but gave orders. He commanded the organization, checked progress, fixed problems, and coordinated the efforts of the network. His father, Welsh Sr., played a leadership role, maintaining contacts, signing off on key decisions, and helping with logistics when needed. Both men played defined roles. They kept themselves from being directly involved in day-to-day transport. Instead, they protected themselves by having trusted lieutenants like Mark Shields, who coordinated routing, storage, and discipline within the organization. With millions of goods sold, the profits were seen in his lifestyle. Apart from the £57,000 Cancun wedding holiday, Welsh Jr. took regular foreign holidays. He purchased expensive watches, such as Rolex and Tag Heuer. He purchased a luxury caravan in the holiday village of Gronant, North Wales. He bought jewelry with cash, and homes were often rented using someone else's name or with help from others. But what baffled financial investigators was that none of this was kept hidden. There were no filings for taxes, no businesses registered, and no work history to explain the money flowing in and out. Welsh Jr. wasn't hiding anything. He believed the system would eventually make a mistake and let him slip through. He worked for years, selling merchandise, taking money, and dealing with people without ever being mentioned publicly in a criminal investigation. But not in 2012. The Northwest Regional Organised Crime Unit, with assistance from Titan and Police Scotland, initiated a secret investigation called Operation Blenheim. The goal of Operation Blenheim was to gather strong evidence against the Welsh network without letting the suspects know they were being watched. Surveillance officers monitored couriers between safe houses and train stations, tracked their routes, and identified when they reached Glasgow. Undercover police monitored drop-off locations. Phone data analysts monitored activity on burner phones and checked connections between individuals. Investigation teams tracked packaging materials, where the plastics came from, what chemicals they held, and how they were made. Liam Clotworthy was arrested by police on October 2nd, 2012, on what would have been his 19th visit to Glasgow. He was arrested with a bag containing 1.2 kilograms of heroin that could fetch over £100,000 if sold in bulk. That arrest triggered the start of a full-scale police action. Police stormed various premises in Merseyside within hours. One of the significant finds was in Everton, where Colin Harrison attempted to dispose of evidence by dropping a briefcase from a high window. The briefcase burst on the ground, and almost 3 kilograms of heroin was recovered from it. Harrison was arrested. Other locations turned up large amounts of drugs, money records, locked mobile phones, and coded notebooks with details of shipments, quantities, and names. By this point, the command structure of the network had broken down. Arrests went on for days, ensnaring couriers, packagers, and street-level dealers. More than 30 individuals were arrested. The case against Welsh Jr., his father, and Shields was built on intercepted calls, seized items, and detailed surveillance reports. The evidence was overwhelming. In April 2013, the principal defendant stood trial at Liverpool Crown Court. Prosecutors showed the hierarchy, the drugs, the communication logs, and the direct connections between orders placed by Welsh Jr. and the activity of his couriers. The convictions were unanimous. Christopher Welsh Jr. received 16 years and 8 months. His father, Christopher Sr., received 15 years and 4 months. Mark Shields received 14 years and 8 months. 27 other gang members were sentenced individually. The group was sentenced overall to almost 200 years imprisonment. The authorities had shut down the visible part of the operation, but they didn't expect what happened next. Shortly after receiving a sentence at HMP Loudham Grange, Christopher Welsh Jr. possessed a hidden mobile phone and a collection of SIM cards. Through them, he re-established contact with Neil Sutermeyer in Liverpool and John Reed in Glasgow. Welsh Jr. continued to control logistics in prison, giving directions, delivering goods, and having financial and supply chain control through locked and coded communication. The structure of the operation changed slightly, but it kept working the same way. Couriers resumed deliveries, shipping Class A drugs by train from Merseyside to Scotland, with Glasgow once more serving as a major distribution point. Between July 2013 and September 2014, law enforcement tracked shipments worth over £3 million on the street. The packaging methods were the same, and cutting agents were used to ensure maximum profits for each kilogram. Police seized nearly 1 kilogram of heroin from a car in Glasgow, which was to be sold on the street. The size and length of this activity after sentencing led to another large police effort. Operation Prion was started by Titan to deal with Welsh Junior's prison control system, and Operation Cervella to handle Sotomayor and Reed's outside work. Safe houses were watched again. Phone signal analysis showed repeated contact between homes and prisons in Liverpool and Scotland. Search warrants were obtained. Prison staff regularly searched HMP Loudham Grange. On the 10th of October 2013, 2 SIM cards were discovered hidden inside Welsh Junior and a mobile phone concealed in his waistband. Despite these discoveries, he continued to use new illegal phones smuggled into his cell. In April 2014, a further search uncovered 2 more SIM cards. Each phone or SIM card was used for a short time, then thrown away. The connection between prisoners and outside helpers relied on trusted middlemen. Wendy Abraham, a past nursery nurse with no prior criminal record, was one of them. She was used to smuggling money and drugs from Liverpool to Scotland, and was very central to smuggling mobile phones and SIM cards into prison. Her home was also used to temporarily store drugs before they were moved out. Phone records during the case proved that Abraham was following orders from prisoners through coded messages. She also shared drugs with other carriers and coordinated when the pickups would be made. As surveillance increased, police caught messages showing that Sotomayor was still training new couriers in Liverpool while taking instructions from Welsh Junior phone calls between Sotomayor and John Reed in Glasgow, detailed amounts, delivery points, and cash return directions. Police later found notebooks at Reed's house that showed payments and matched what was said in the calls. By September 2014, Titan and Merseyside police began taking apart the drug network that had started up again. At the same time, raids were conducted in Liverpool, Glasgow, and the surrounding areas. In John Reed's house, officers confiscated 980 grams of heroin, a notebook containing sales records for a few months, and a number of burner phones. Sotomayor was arrested in Liverpool after a search found money, phones, and signs that he was helping organize drug couriers. Abraham was arrested soon after, caught with communication equipment and drugs concealed in her personal belongings. In 2015, the Crown Prosecution Service opened a new case at Liverpool Crown Court. Christopher Welsh Jr. was charged with conspiring to sell Class A drugs from July 2013 to September 2014. The prosecution used phone records, recorded calls, SIM card data, courier reports, and evidence found during prison searches. Despite a wealth of evidence, Welsh Jr. refused to testify. The court convicted him. He received an additional 12 years in prison. Neil Sotomayor received 14 years. John Reed received 9 years and 4 months. Wendy Abraham was convicted of planning to supply Class A drugs, trying to supply them, and sneaking banned items into prison. She received 10 years and 6 months. 10 others were convicted on conspiracy-related charges. In total, this second conspiracy amounted to over 90 years in jail. After the criminal convictions, a second financial investigation was initiated under the Proceeds of Crime Act. Items believed to have been bought with illegal money were found and frozen. In September 2014, the court ordered Christopher Welsh Jr. to pay back £275,000 within 6 months. If he did not meet this requirement, he would serve 3 more years in prison. His father had to repay £150,000, or face a further 27 months in jail. Despite being convicted twice and serving long prison sentences, Welsh Jr. kept breaking prison rules. In August 2020, when an inspection was carried out at HMP Weymouth by the officers, they discovered a smuggled iPhone and SIM card in his possession. There was no sign of ongoing drug coordination, but he was referred for disciplinary action. He was then transferred to HMP Berwyn, a Category C jail in North Wales. In March 2022, Welsh Jr. was in Caernarfon Crown Court and admitted having banned items in prison. He received an extra 6-month sentence. By 2025, he had accumulated a total sentence of 28 years. By 2025, Christopher Welsh Jr. was still in prison with no real hope of release in the near future. All identifiable assets had been confiscated. Close associates were in jail. His ability to run or affect any criminal activity had been fully shut down. This is the story of Christopher Welsh Jr., a drug trafficker who amassed a £200 million illegal empire and tried to manage it from behind bars. A quiet Cheshire street is bathed in police lights at 5 a.m. Police swoop on a mansion, arresting Paul Green, mastermind of Britain's largest drug smuggling gang, valued at £7 billion. The gang brought 50 tons of drugs into the UK, staying one step ahead of the law for years. Today's video is about Green's rise, high-tech tactics, global network, and the catastrophic errors that led to his 32-year prison sentence. Paul Green was born in 1965 in Widnes, Cheshire. Widnes is a chemical manufacturing town, with mostly working-class residents. There is not much information about his life when he was young, but he grew up in a modest area. Green ran hairdressers and a cleaning business in his 20s and 30s, and became a local entrepreneur. These businesses gave him planning and organizational skills that he later used in criminal activity. In his 40s, Green sought greater profits and transitioned from legitimate business to crime. Green started his criminal career with small frauds in the early 2000s. He committed property scams and used fake names like Simon Swift and James Russell to hide financial problems. These crimes linked him to other criminals in northwest England and laid the groundwork for his future drug dealing. In 2015, Green had no criminal record, showing he could keep a low profile. His experience with fraud and ability to blend in helped him run a large drug operation. In August 2015, Green established a cocaine smuggling ring that was active until September 2018. The ring smuggled in 50 tons of cocaine, heroin, cannabis, and amphetamines worth £7 billion, and was the biggest drug conspiracy in the UK. The operation supplied criminal gangs across the UK, from southeast England to Scotland, with drugs. Green's gang acted as a wholesaler, exporting drugs to local gangs for street sales, earning gargantuan profits. Green hid drugs in shipments of onions, garlic, and ginger. The strong smells of these foods made it harder for drug-sniffing dogs at ports like Felixstowe and Harwich to detect the drugs. Since the goods spoiled quickly, inspectors were less likely to check them carefully. Out of 240 shipments, only 6 were stopped before the operation ended, showing that this method worked well. Green chose these foods to take advantage of weaknesses in customs rules, which let drugs enter the UK without being noticed. To help with the smuggling, Green set up fake companies like Blackpool Fruit and Veg. The firms had real-looking documents, like invoices and shipping lists, and rented storage facilities. Some of the companies copied real businesses and used stolen VAT numbers to avoid raising suspicion. Unaware trucking companies moved the shipments, not knowing they were carrying drugs, which kept the risk away from Green. Green's network extended to the Netherlands, where he partnered with Dutch criminals Barbara Reinbout and Johannes Vesters. His trucking business made it easy to move drugs from Europe using busy trade routes. Vesters and Reinbout supplied cocaine, heroin, and other drugs, making sure there was always enough supply. This partnership helped Green grow his business faster than any other drug group in the UK. The operation was organized like a business. Green oversaw strategy and foreign partnerships, assigning tasks to key associates. Sohail Qureshi handled day-to-day logistics, arranging shipments and distribution. Stephen Martin dealt with finances, hiding profits in bank accounts and shell companies. Russell Leonard arranged transportation, ensuring drugs reached warehouses. This organization distanced Green from dangerous activities while enabling him to maintain control of the network. Green focused on keeping his operations secure. He used EncroChat, a secure phone network under the name Duck Farmer, to talk to his associates. The platform shared details about shipments, payments, and partners, keeping the operation hidden. Green operated from a hotel room near his residence in Widnes, using its Wi-Fi to avoid tracking. He often changed phones and SIM cards, showing he understood how the police worked and was serious about staying off their radar. The operation used financial crimes to pay for its activities. Green and accomplice Leslie Quinn hijacked a man's identity to obtain a £262,000 mortgage. They opened bank accounts in the man's name and set up Blackpool Fruit and Veg, moving money around to pay drug debts. This scam showed Green was willing to target innocent people, adding another layer to his crimes beyond drug dealing. Green had a lot of money, but didn't show it off. Within 2 years, he spent £1 million, £26,000 of which went on watches and jewelry. When he was arrested, police took £10,000 cash from his home, a small part of his profits. Green put his money into property and businesses to clean it, avoiding the flashy image of other drug bosses. His neighbors saw him as a successful businessman, unaware of where his money came from. The drug operation was massive. The amount moved weighed as much as 30 cars. Green's group supplied drugs to street gangs and offered delivery services to other crime groups. They made money in 2 ways, by selling drugs and by charging to transport them. This earned billions while keeping Green away from street-level dealing. The operation ran like a real delivery company, but its impact was devastating, causing addiction, overdoses, and gang violence across the UK. Things started to go wrong in 2016. A Dutch lorry driver, suspicious about his load, called the police. They found 8 kilograms of cocaine hidden in onions at Harwich International Port. The National Crime Agency responded with Operation Falcon, working with Dutch police and border force. That bust was a warning, and Green changed tactics, starting new fake companies to keep smuggling. In 2018, a huge mistake exposed the operation's weak points. Members Russell Leonard and another man were told to deliver 57 kilograms of amphetamines from the Netherlands. They left the van unlocked in an Amsterdam car park and went drinking all night. The Dutch police, who were watching them, stopped the van and made arrests. Green's angry reaction was caught on a hidden recording, putting him in serious trouble. The whole thing began to fall apart in 2020 when European police cracked EncroChat. Green's Duck Farmer messages showed drug plans, money deals, and ties to Rheinbout investors. The hack revealed everything, leading to arrests all over Europe. For Green, it was the final blow. The NCA now had clear proof of his control over the £7 billion plot. Operation Falcon expanded with better tracking. The NCA and Dutch police watched warehouses in Sheffield, Leeds, and the Netherlands, following drug routes. Phone taps caught Green's talks with his team. Seized drugs had labels linking them to different UK gangs, proving how wide the network reached. By late 2018, the NCA had enough proof to take down the group, with planned arrests. In 2019, police raids early in the morning targeted Green's operations. The police arrested Green from his residence in Widnes and seized £10,000 in cash. 13 others, such as Sohail Qureshi, Stephen Martin, Leslie Quinn, and Russell Leonard, were arrested in the Netherlands and the UK. Police also found drugs, fake business papers, and financial records, closing warehouses and exposing the fake companies. The raids closed down a 3-year smuggling operation. The court trials at Liverpool Crown Court started in 2021, and became the longest in UK criminal history, lasting 23 months until 2024. COVID-19 delays stretched out the case, which involved 18 people. Prosecutors used EncroChat messages, seized drugs, bank records, and video footage. Green was charged with planning to bring in Class A and B drugs, lying to get money, and cleaning illegal money. The jury took 141 hours to reach a verdict, showing how complex the case was. Green was given 32 years behind bars, one of the longest in the UK for drug dealing. The judge said the damage was massive, with addiction, violence, and social problems spreading because of the operation. Sohail Qureshi was given 21 years, Stephen Martin 28 years, and Russell Leonard 24 years. Dutch partners Barbara Reinbout and Johannes Vesters were given 18 and 20 years respectively. The 18 guilty verdicts added up to 246 years in prison, a major hit to organized crime. The trials demonstrated the impact of the operation on society. The 50 tons of drugs created a national emergency, causing overdoses, gang wars, and damage in local communities. Crime rates went up in most areas, as did addiction. The £7 billion operation made money like a normal business, but the profits were used to fund more crime. The case demonstrated the far-reaching consequences of drug dealing on families, businesses, and public safety. International collaboration was at the center of Green's downfall. The NCA worked with Dutch police, Border Force, and Europol, sharing information about supply chains and drug routes. The EncroChat hack showed how modern technology can help police, turning a criminal tool into solid evidence. Green's takedown shook the UK's drug trade. His network supplied drugs to numerous gangs, and his dismantling compelled shifting in drug supply. Local drug gangs attempted to replace Green's business, but none were this large. Green's empire was built on trust in real companies, trade networks, and even his partners. His fall showed how that trust could be a weakness. The EncroChat breach, betrayal by people who trusted technology, and a careful truck driver were turning points. These, combined with relentless police work, showed that no criminal group is too big to be taken down. Green's 32-year prison sentence guarantees that he will spend the rest of his life behind bars, bringing an end to his reign as the big fella. His nickname, once a point of pride, is now a warning. Taking down the operation stopped a major drug pipeline, but the demand for drugs is still there. It takes more than police work to stop this. We need to deal with the deeper causes like poverty, lack of opportunity, and addiction. Paul Green's legacy is about damage and lessons learned. His £7 billion empire caused a lot of harm, but breaking it apart gives us hope. This case shows that strong police work, global teamwork, and new tech can stop even smart criminals. It also shows that we must keep working to support our communities and stop the next disaster driven by greed. On March 25, 2017, a massive explosion was reported in a home on Beresford Road, Dingle. Officers immediately responded to the distress call and reached the scene. What they found next shocked everyone to their core. A homemade grenade was detonated after Tina Knight, a barmaid and cleaner, was preparing for a night out, and the bomb fell from above a cupboard. Was it terrorism? Was it an intentional attack? The police entered the house prepared to face something related to terrorism. But instead, they found over 158 kilos of drugs, and thus began one of the most insane drug busts in UK history. This is the story of Liam Cornett, a drug dealer who lived a lavish life without anyone suspecting a thing against him. Liam Cornett, also known as the Lamb, was a fugitive, a drug dealer, and a sophisticated millionaire, filling the streets of the UK with drugs. He wasn't the average dealer who stood on corners, stashed drugs under floorboards or mattresses, or hid them in trash cans. He was a cartel-level player, wearing Rolex watches, sipping expensive champagne in Monte Carlo, and flying in chartered helicopters. But he didn't let anyone know the true nature of his business. In fact, everyone knew that he and a team of his employees were legitimate businessmen who became successful. However, the truth behind this flashy lifestyle was horrifying. Cornette had built something of a ruthless empire on his own. They used encrypted phones, armed couriers, and a vast network of dealers all across Liverpool to the southwest coast. The interesting part was that while the main market was in the UK, this drug ring wasn't being run in the UK. In fact, Cornette and his mates ran the entire operation from a massive villa on the Costa del Sol in Spain. Because of this, Cornette was a ghost. Nobody knew who he was, except the people he worked with. His empire wasn't anything like a drug-dealing gang. It was a proper business that employed couriers, runners, strategists, enforcers, and much more. He had people handle everything and make him a lot of money. Of course, with 158 kilos of drugs, he wasn't running a small business at all. His encrypted phone in Liverpool alone received over 17,000 calls in a couple of months, and this was just one phone. The most surprising thing was that the entire drug-dealing operation was being run through these encrypted Encro chat phones. Cornette's own device was nicknamed Aquarius, and he ran the whole empire from anywhere in the world. No fingerprints, no audio, just orders sent through ghost signals all across the UK. But even masterminds need help sometimes, and Cornette had a group of trusted aides by his side. Michael Rice was his right-hand man, the guy who was on the grind daily, making sure operations ran smoothly at all times. He kept a Glock pistol on himself at all times, because his job came with a lot of risks, almost all of which were life-threatening. Kieran Eves was the person who helped Cornette expand to new areas, taking control of new territories, getting runners on the street, and supplying Class A drugs to customers. Jack Ball was one of the biggest runners of Cornette's team. He was the man behind the gang's expansion to the southwest, an area where they made thousands of pounds every day in drug money. Craig Gangland was their accountant of sorts. He handled all the money, making sure all the runners came back with the full share every day. He also handled the graft phones, communicating with Cornette and everyone else involved in the drug trade. Since he held all the money, he was one of the most important and trusted members of the group. But these were just a few members of an otherwise massive drug-dealing operation. Carl Maddox, for example, was a logistics guy who oversaw courier runs from the northwest to the south coast. A similar role was played by Bobby Hill, who managed all the operations in Plymouth. Basically, every single person had a job, and their roles helped the operation run smoothly. If any one of them were taken out of the equation, the business would fall apart. Due to this, they moved discreetly, never let anyone get a hint of what they were doing, and their secret moves kept them safe from the police. But like most secrets, this one was also eventually going to come out, and when it did, it brought down the entire gang. Back in the UK, Rice and the rest of Cornette's lieutenants were moving the drugs as usual. Business never stopped. However, Cornette's life was different. He never had a hands-on role in any business dealings and lived most of his life in Spain, enjoying the millions he made from his drug empire. He was never caught before, but this time, things were different. After the homemade grenade exploded in his UK house where his mother was living, the police stumbled upon a 158-kilo stash of drugs. This wasn't an average drug bust. It was one of the biggest stashes of Class A and B drugs found inside a home. The police investigations began immediately. A citywide search for anybody related to Cornette, his mother, or the drugs was conducted by the police. However, finding drug dealers who were this sophisticated wasn't an easy task. In the initial stages, the police made inquiries all across Europe. Shortly afterward, some information came that led to the Spanish police raiding a cannabis farm in Alicante, Malaga, and Barcelona. However, the connection to the drugs found in Dingle had not been established yet. Then, in July 2017, the police launched an extensive operation codenamed Operation Anvil. This operation was solely launched to find the people responsible for Cornett's operation in the UK. By this point, Cornett and Rice were already managing a massive supply of drugs in Liverpool and Hull. But they had no idea that detectives were now watching their every move, every drug run, and every courier. The same month, Cornett and Rice traveled together to the Netherlands for a music event. The detectives knew this, and they kept tabs on them. Shortly afterward, they received information that Cornett was put in prison in the Netherlands for 9 days because he was considered an undesirable character. This was because in 2014, Cornett was prosecuted for offenses, including the attempted homicide of a police officer. During this time in the Netherlands, Cornett called Rice and asked him to keep the operations on a standstill until he was released. This recorded conversation helped the police gather that Cornett was the mastermind behind the operation. All other members were his accomplices. These accomplices were consistently transferring huge sums of money to Cornett, and this made the police even more suspicious. The primary reason behind this was that Cornett had no real source of income. Yet he was staying in Spain, enjoying life in a luxurious villa in one of the most lavish areas of the country. In a video, he was even seen throwing cash around and showcased riding in a luxurious Bentley with friends. His activities, spending habits, lavish lifestyle, and everything about him screamed that he was doing something illegal. Yet, he continued to live his dream life without any worry. After all, he had no idea that the police were onto him, and his drug empire was about to come to an end. Operation Anvil was in full effect, and the police were actively tracing every step Cornett took. But since he was overseas, nobody could do anything about him. Meanwhile, the police had captured Rice in December 2017 when they stopped an Audi RS3 traveling down Smithdown Road. When he was searched, the police officers found his unlicensed Glock, and this led to a sentence of 6 years. One of the key members of Cornett's empire was arrested. However, the kingpin was still roaming free. Catching him was a priority. The golden moment had at last arrived. Cornett had made the biggest mistake of his life in October 2018, over a year after the explosion in his mother's house. Believing that he was untouchable, he flew back to the UK and arrived at Manchester Airport. He wore flashy clothes, but the highlight of the show was his wrist. He had a £55,000 Rolex on his wrist, showcasing that he wasn't just making money, he was making some serious cash. Unfortunately, this show-off didn't last very long, and as soon as he landed, the authorities were right there, waiting for his arrival. Cornett was arrested at the spot, and this marked the beginning of the end for his criminal reign in the UK. After Cornett's arrest, the police initiated a new operation codenamed Operation Valkyrie in December 2018. This nationwide operation was the key to bringing down Cornett's entire network of drug suppliers that were filling the UK streets with amphetamines and cocaine. Michael Rice and Liam Cornett were already in custody. But the police knew through surveillance that their gang was much larger. Therefore, in the following months after Operation Valkyrie was initiated, the police made some huge arrests. Kieran Eves, the principal organizer, was captured, who was involved in all the high-level meetings with criminals. Craig Gowland, the lead organizer, was also arrested, along with Carl Maddox, Bobby Hill, and Daryl Clough. Nicholas Corner was arrested a couple of years ago when he was detained at the John Lennon Airport with £25,000 in cash hidden in his luggage. The police thought that this money was being taken to Cornett, but at the time, they had little evidence of it. Apart from these high-level players, the lower staff included John McDonough and George Cubbin, both of whom were arrested during a sting operation by undercover cops. In total, over 25 members of Liam Cornett's gang were arrested by the police. All of these members were either street runners, couriers, facilitators, organizers, or money launderers. After Operation Valkyrie ended, Liam Cornett was sent to trial between May and August 2019. He was such a massive kingpin with such influence that entire Liverpool streets had to be closed off throughout the trial. An armed police escort took him between HMP Manchester and the Liverpool Crown Court. Finally, in 2019, Cornett was found guilty of supplying Class A and B drugs, conspiracy, and various other charges, and sentenced to 26 years in prison. Michael Rice was also found guilty of conspiracy to supply drugs and was sentenced to 12 years and 8 months. This sentence was added to his 6-year sentence, which he was already serving for carrying the Glock pistol. Kieran Eves was sentenced to 13 years and 9 months for conspiracy to supply Class A drugs, burglary, and possession with intent to supply. The remaining members of the Cornett gang were sentenced to a total of over 200 years behind bars. Today, all these drug dealers are serving their sentences after what the Liverpool police called one of the most significant drug busts in UK history. Liam Cornett built a massive empire, but it all crumbled because of two things: an accidental explosion and showing off his flashy lifestyle. In November 2022, the West Midlands Police launched Operation Hunterian, a large-scale investigation that targeted 4 major county drug networks. This is the moment when the police arrested several members of the drug ring inside a house. In just 6 months, the police officers cracked open a vast network of sophisticated drug dealers. From heroin to crack, this gang was making millions of pounds every year. But now they were exposed once and for all. This is how the West Midlands Police captured 12 men who were running a massive drug ring in the UK. The West Midlands Police carried out Operation Hunterian across Birmingham and Solihull, targeting the Rico, Diego, Vigo, and Potter County lines. Usually, each county line is full of territorial disputes because different gangs control it. However, there was an unusual level of cooperation among these 4 lines. This alliance allowed the drug dealers to expand their customer base, streamline operations, and maximize profits, all while working together as partners, not enemies. According to the police officials, they made between £18,000 and £20,000 of revenue per week. The annual revenue was over £1.2 million, making it one of the biggest narcotics rings in the UK. The revenue they generated also meant that their internal operations were highly sophisticated. Each line had dedicated cell phones that sent messages in bulk, advertising the availability of Class A drugs. A vast network of users, customers, and middlemen received these messages and came out to purchase the drugs. Over 1,000 calls were made daily from these dedicated mobile phones, and over 200 regular customers were noted. But this wasn't a simple business transaction like standing on the street corner and selling drugs. In fact, it was a highly coordinated joint effort between the 4 lines. They shared resources, remained in constant contact with each other, and monitored any law enforcement movements nearby. If any member from any line suspected danger, he would instantly inform the others so everyone could evade law enforcement detection. At the Rico line, 2 brothers, Adam and Haroon Iqbal, along with Muhammad Usman, spearheaded the operations. Their primary area of dealing was in Hodge Hill, where they sold thousands of pounds of drugs every week. Adam Slater and Tiana Phillips managed the Diego line. Yassine Sadiq also significantly helped them with day-to-day business, managing business deals, phone calls, and the supply of drugs. Ilyas Sadiq controlled the Figo line along with Mark Seeley and Amani Adams. According to the police, these 3 communicated with each other regularly, coordinated drop-offs of drugs, and line top-ups. And lastly, the Potter line was operated by Anis Mahmoud, Humair ul Rahman, and Levi Mukwita. Anis was the boss here while Levi was the middleman. He supplied the drugs across all 4 lines, making sure that every line had enough stock to sell. For years, these people were on the police radar. Officers knew that a massive drug ring was working in these areas, supplying Class A narcotics all across the UK. However, they had no idea how dangerous they were. But this didn't mean that the police stepped back. They investigated. They knew they would gather evidence and identify the people behind this group. It was just a matter of time and patience. From November 2022 to May 2023, the police investigations went on. During this period, several breakthroughs were made. For example, on 3rd February 2023, Adam and Tiana were stopped in their car in Solihull. Their phone data showed that the Diego line where they were working was active in the area. A couple of weeks later, on the 14th of February, Slater was stopped by the police once again. This time, 2 more phones were recovered. One of these phones was also being used for the Diego line. 4 days later, Yasin Sadiq made the biggest mistake of his life. He reactivated and switched the Diego line to a new network and did the same with his personal number. He had no idea that the police were constantly tracking him through telecommunication investigations and CCTV footage. Unaware of the police tail, he smartly changed the network. However, on 17th February 2023, the detectives tracked the change and linked him to the Diego line. Further investigations revealed that Yasin's phone was associated with the Figo line, and it showed regular communications between Mark Seeley and Amani Adams. Since they were working for Ilyas Sadiq, the phone data also gave the police information about him. As for the Potter line, messages revealed that Mukwita was supplying the drugs to all 4 lines, while Anis and Humair oversaw the operations. It was a huge and highly sophisticated operation. The police had to move in right away. But as easy as it sounded, it required meticulous planning. They couldn't just stop the suspects and put them in cuffs. What they could do was secure arrest warrants and execute the plan smartly. Finally, in May 2023, the authorities had the warrants in hand. Over 240 police force members were briefed about the operation. 17 arrest warrants were to be executed across Birmingham and Solihull. Multiple properties had to be hit at once to make sure that nobody escaped or communicated about the police raid to their partners. Speed, aggression, and precision were the key ingredients of the raids. Thanks to the efforts of the police, these raids turned out to be successful. On 23rd May, early in the morning, the police arrested 9 individuals after they raided different houses across Birmingham and Solihull. All of them were either hiding or still asleep when the officers busted down their doors. The drug dealers who thought they were untouchable were finally facing the wrath of the law. Inside the houses, the police found bundles of evidence. The phones, which were the backbone of their operation, had customer lists, drug stocks, images, and text messages. Walls were drilled into to hide stacks of cash and Class A drugs. It was a treasure trove of evidence. Everything that the police needed to lock them away for a long time was right there. All that was left to do was to book them and put them behind bars. Now, 9 people were in police custody, but at least 3 more were still left to be arrested. The police were on the lookout for Adams, Rehman, and Mahmoud, but they were nowhere to be seen. Then, something unexpected happened. Adams and Rehman had seen the news about the arrests of their fellow gang members. Both of them knew that the police weren't too far away from catching them, and when they did, they weren't going to cut them any slack. Considering everything that was happening around them, and the drug operation being completely busted, Adams and Rehman were left with no choice. They decided to turn themselves in to the police, hoping that they would get some favors like a reduced sentence or a plea deal for this noble act. The police brought them into custody, but Mahmoud was still on the run. Authorities found out that Mahmoud was an immigrant from Pakistan, and he was in his home country at the time of the arrest. They notified all the airports about him, giving strict orders that as soon as he lands, he shall be arrested. The news of his friend's arrest came out everywhere. However, Mahmoud either didn't read the news or he just thought of himself as being untouchable. In September 2023, he hopped on a flight from Pakistan to Birmingham, thinking that he would just go back about his business once he was in the UK. But he had no idea that the police were waiting for him at the Birmingham airport, ready to take him to jail. As soon as his flight landed at the airport, Mahmoud was taken into custody by armed police officers. He was left in shock because he thought he was untouchable. However, the police proved him wrong. All 12 members who had been running 4 county lines were finally arrested. The West Midlands Police reported that a complex investigation made these arrests possible. A large number of drugs were taken off the streets, making the UK a safer place. For over a year, these people stayed behind bars, awaiting their sentences. Finally, in December 2024, the Birmingham Crown Court awarded them their jail terms. Since all 12 had pleaded guilty already, there was no chance of the court or authorities going easy on them. Adam Iqbal got 12.5 years in prison. Anis Mahmoud was sentenced to 12 years and 10 months. Yasin Sadiq and Ilyas Sadiq were sentenced to 11 years and 10 years and 10 months, respectively. Levi Mukwita received a 10.5-year sentence, along with Muhammad Usman. Amani Adams and Humair ul-Rahman, who turned themselves in to the police, were sentenced to 8 years and 6 years, respectively. Harun Iqbal and Adam Slater were sentenced to 6 years, while Tiana Phillips and Mark Seeley received 5 years and 4 years and 8 months, respectively. After the arrests, Detective Sergeant Craig Tennant of the West Midlands Police said that their actions do not stop at enforcement. He encouraged the public to get in touch with them if they have any information related to any similar activities in their surroundings. The public information is crucial to their investigations, and that is what brought down these 12 people. Today, all of them are behind bars, serving prison sentences for conspiring to and supplying Class A drugs across Birmingham and Solihull.
A gunshot rips through a peaceful seaside village. An elderly couple is dead in their bungalow, their tea still hot on the table. 80 miles away, 2 brothers, Colin and David Gunn, are grinning, their revenge under their belts. They have built a crime gang out of drugs, violence and blood, turning their city into Shottingham. Their cartel currently operates with tight control, but the police are closing in. How did estate teenagers turn into crime lords? Why are their violent vendettas so disastrous? And can they be stopped? This is the true story of the Bestwood cartel. In the 1970s, in Nottingham's sprawling council estate of Bestwood, crime took over the streets and poverty crushes families. This is where Colin Gunn, born in 1967, and brother David, born in 1965, grew up. The area feels like a ticking bomb, with unemployment at 20% and families scraping by on benefits or shoplifting. Colin, lanky with a calculating glance, learns to outwit the crowd, and David solves disputes with a punch. Together they are a force, impenetrable and fiercely protective. By the time they are teenagers, the brothers are bruisers at Henry Whipple Junior School, known for their bad tempers, but respected for moments of kindness. But there are hints of a desire for power. They watch older lads sell cannabis in backstreets, watching money exchanging hands as police turn a blind eye. Bestwood's criminal scene feels like a playground to them, and they are ready to jump in. By the 1980s, Nottingham's rave scene erupted, and with it, a huge demand for Class A's, ecstasy, amphetamines, and cannabis swept the city's dance clubs. Colin, who's now a teenager, is selling off tiny runs of pills, pocketing a profit, and making connections. David, meanwhile, earns a reputation as a thug. In 1985, Colin got his first conviction, check fraud for a whopping £10,000, 6 months inside a youth detention centre. It toughened him up, reinforcing his hatred of authority. David, too, steps over a line, landing before a court for a charge of assault after a street altercation leaves a man sporting a face full of blood. Their crimes are getting more serious, but they're learning fast how to frighten, make money, and stay a step ahead. Bestwood's tight-knit community, where snitching is a death sentence, guards them. Neighbours know the Guns deliver rough justice, whether it's a stolen TV or a cheating partner, and because of that, people stay loyal. However, loyalty comes at a price. Brothers demand secrecy. and they're starting to get it at gunpoint. The early 1990s is a turning point. At 24, Colin, known as Knuckles, dreams of running the drug trade in Bestwood, and David, just out after serving 3.5 years for killing a man. The brothers gather a gang: John McSally, John Dawes, Michael O'Brien, all from the area, looking for money and power. This is the Bestwood gang. Colin's plan is carefully mapped out. They set up supply routes from Malaga, Amsterdam and Brussels, bringing in kilos of ecstasy and amphetamines. Gang members make more than 40 flights in 2 years, moving drugs and cash with military-style organisations. David handles street deals, making sure runners keep Nottingham's clubs stocked with their drugs. By 1997, the cartel widened its options to cocaine, its higher prices creating the wealth they would need for their empire. Between November 2002 and June 2003, they transported £8.5 million worth of drugs, laundering money through pubs, car dealing firms and real estate. Colin's paranoia, fueled by heavy cocaine use and steroids, shows through, but he still controls everything. David's violence keeps people in line. One man who stole from them had his eyelids torn off and his mouth badly injured, leading to a 4-year, 9-month prison sentence. But the empire is only half of it. And that's without even talking about the drugs. The guns have protection rackets for Bestwood's pubs, shops, and smaller businesses. Pay up, 100 quid a week. Refuse, your windows get broken, or your shop is smashed. Say no again, and your delivery van gets set on fire. It's only a matter of time before everyone moves back. But the guns wear a second face. To the 7,500 residents of the estate, they are protectors. They mediate disputes, returning stolen goods, standing up to bullies, and provide money to struggling families. Estate residents dub Colin a modern-day Robin Hood, a saviour of the estate. But it's a risk with a payback. Every favour earns loyalty, securing their silence when the police arrive. The brothers host community barbecues, finance youth footy teams, and even foot the bill for Granny's birthday greetings. But there is always a quid pro quo. A mum who gets £50 for groceries may later be asked to move illegal goods. A child who gets a new bike might owe them a favour. This double life, as kind figures and ruthless gang leaders, keeps the estate under their control. Police have a hard time getting witnesses, even victims won't speak. The cartel's strength is unshakable, but with power comes attention. The early 2000s Nottingham was at its breaking point. Gun crime spirals, 16 murders annually by 2002, up to 21 by 2004. Gun violence gives the city the nickname Shottingham, a label that hits hard. Colin, now 35, leads a spate of violence. Derek Sr., a social worker who dares to stand up to their power, was shot several times in 2002 on Colin's orders. He survives, but is badly scarred. Patrick Marshall, a drug dealer running an illegal street operation, is murdered in 2003 by enforcer John McSally, with Colin's approval and David watching. The cartel is tied to 6 murders and more than 50 shootings, each act tightening their grip on the city. Colin, high on cocaine, loses control and orders brutal beatings, even using chainsaws to scare off rivals. Gun crime makes the streets of Bestwood a fortress of fear, deserted streets at night. The city struggles under the grip of the cartel. Applications to the University of Nottingham drop by 10% as students avoid the Shottingham tag. Companies retreat, with giants like Boots unwilling to invest in the city. Tourists avoid Nottingham's Robin Hood statues and vintage pubs, scared off by reports of drive-by shootings. The people who stay are Bestwood residents, caught between the guns' generosity and their threats. Colin feeds off the chaos, seeing himself as Scarface's Tony Montana, with an ego blown up by power. David, who is less careful, rules by fear, moving through Bestwood like a gang boss. But their boldness attracts attention. The National Crime Squad, created to fight organised crime, began targeting the cartel. Undercover officers move in, tapping phones and watching the edges of Bestwood with surveillance vans. The guns don't realise it yet, but they're heading straight into a trap. Everything changed on the evening of August 30th, 2003. At the Sporting Chance pub in Bulwell, the night was busy with late-night drinkers. Jamie Gunn, the 19-year-old nephew of Colin Gunn, was working as a doorman. 2 men, Michael O'Brien and Gary Salmon, tried to get inside, but they were wearing tracksuits and trainers, breaking the dress code. Jamie refused to let them in. An argument broke out. During the scuffle, O'Brien was hit in the face, possibly with an ashtray thrown by Jamie, and leaves humiliated, vowing revenge. They drove out of the car park, their headlights cutting through the darkness. Suddenly, a masked figure stepped into their path, holding a shotgun. A shot rang out, shattering the night. Marvin, who was driving, was hit in the head. Jamie, shocked but unhurt, held his dying friend in his arms while the attackers fled into the night. Marvin was rushed to Queen's Medical Center but died soon after. He had been an innocent victim, mistaken for someone else. The consequences were serious. Jamie blamed himself for Marvin's death. He turned to drinking and drugs to cope. His health collapsed. By August 2004, just a year later, Jamie was dead too, killed by pneumonia, though his family believed it was the trauma that truly destroyed him. Meanwhile, Colin Gunn, who loved Jamie like a son, was filled with rage. Michael O'Brien was arrested and found guilty of Marvin's murder in July 2004. He was sentenced to life in prison, with a minimum of 24 years to serve. Salmon, arrested later in 2007, gets 17. But prison walls can't protect O'Brien from Colin's thirst for revenge. At trial, O'Brien taunts the Gunns, yelling, "Tell Fat Colin I've got something for him," and making fun of Marvin's death, saying his head looked like a red hole in a donut. Sitting in the courtroom, Colin glares at him, already planning revenge. Unable to get to O'Brien, he goes for the next best thing: O'Brien's parents, John and Joan Sterland. The old couple is a typical retiree without involvement with their son's criminal activities. But Colin, consumed by revenge, blames the Sterlands for Jamie's decline, believing Joan refused to testify against O'Brien. The Sterlands, already attacked with firebombs and gunshots at their Carlton home, move to Trusthorpe, a quiet Lincolnshire village 80 miles away. They move into a modest bungalow, hoping to be left alone. But Colin's intelligence network is extensive. Soon he finds their new address. It is a sunny Sunday, August 8th, 2004. Joan had called Lincolnshire police twice before, reporting a prowler near their home. Now, a black Passat pulls up the driveway. Two men in boiler suits and caps, armed with handguns, approach the house. Glass shatters as they fire through the window. Joan cries out as a bullet rips through her chest. John tries to cover her but is hit with a point-blank shot to the head. Both of them crumple to the ground, dead almost instantly. Their killers speed away, leaving a stunned village. Police instantly suspect the cartel, but there is little evidence to show for it, until they discover Colin's fatal mistake. The Sterling killings moved the police into action. Operation Starburst, started by the National Crime Squad in 2003, is ramped up. Every move of the cartels is monitored. Phones are tapped, cars are followed, and meetings are bugged, but there is a problem. Charles Fletcher, a 19-year-old Nottinghamshire police officer, is a mole for Colin, selling case information for £2,000 a month. Fletcher, who was approached for the job before the police employed him, provides Colin with information, even alerting him to surveillance. Colin claims MI5 planted a bug in his letterbox, picking up whispers from 100 meters away. True or not, his arrogance blinds his judgment. In March 2005, police strike. Raids sweep Bestwood, seizing £500,000 in cash, 20 kilos of cocaine, and 15 firearms. Colin's trusted men, John Russell, Michael McNee, and Fletcher, were arrested. The 2006 trial at Nottingham Crown Court is a big news story. Prosecutors describe Colin as a powerful criminal, ruling Bestwood through fear. Secretly recorded phone calls catch him ordering the Sterling murders. Phone records show he was in Trusthorpe on August 8th. The jury delivers its verdict. Colin receives life, with a minimum of 35 years, plus an additional 9 years for bribing police. Russell gets 30, McNee 25, and Fletcher is given 7. David is found not guilty of the murders, but gets 8.5 years for drug offences. Police found £500,000 worth of amphetamines with him. There are riots at Bestwood, with 30 residents burning cars and breaking windows, angry at Colin's fall. But the cartel is finished. Without the brothers, the group falls apart. Members scatter as fugitives and turn on each other, giving evidence to the authorities. The Bestwood cartel rose fast and fell just as hard. David's violence and Colin's cunning built an empire through the ruined streets of Bestwood, funded by violence, extortion, and drugs. They ruled through terror, disguising themselves as saviors. But their brutality, Marvin's killing and the execution of the Sterlings, destroyed them. Nottingham was the cost, becoming Shottingham. But the city resisted, its police and residents tearing apart the legacy of the cartel. The gun's tale is a warning. Power built on blood never lasts. What did you think of the gun's reign? Can Nottingham ever shake off its Shottingham history?
The savagery of Thomas Campbell's killing shocked not just his family, but also veteran detectives who had never seen anything like this. Naked to his socks, his body was covered in 61 individual injuries. Tortured for hours in his own home, Thomas was left to die, the culmination of months-long conspiracy by an individual he had once trusted. What was most shocking about this crime was not just the violence of the attack, but the people behind it. His former wife and the vengeful man at the heart of a deadly plot. It was a crime driven by betrayal, jealousy, and sheer malice that would shake Manchester to its foundations. Early on the morning of July 3rd, 2022, the peaceful streets of Mossley, Greater Manchester, would change forever after the horrific murder of Thomas Campbell. His body was discovered by a concerned neighbor who had noticed the front door of his house wide open. They did not anticipate seeing the gruesome sight of a well-planned crime. When the police arrived, it was evident that this was no random attack, but a cold and calculated act of revenge. A post-mortem would later reveal how much agony Thomas had endured before he died. The brutality of the crime would leave its lasting mark on all the people involved, particularly those who were closest to him. Thomas Campbell also lived a life that appeared perfect. By day, he was a personal trainer, but by night, he was also part of Manchester's underworld. His fortune was not derived from the fitness business, but from selling cocaine and concealing illicit cash. Thomas and his wife, Colleen, appeared to live a dream to everyone around them. They flaunted their wealth on social media with luxury holidays, designer goods, and high-end cars. Their Mossley home was impressive, costing £350,000, with high-end cars parked on the driveway and a lifestyle that appeared to be successful. But this success was founded on crime and deceit. Thomas's criminal life led to consequences. In 2018, the Campbells were investigated by police for money laundering. They discovered that the couple had spent significant money on high-end items, despite claiming they only earned money from benefits and Colleen's part-time job at Matalan. The authorities discovered their links to organized crime, and in 2019, they were arrested. Thomas was jailed for 2 years for money laundering, and Colleen was given 16 months, suspended for 2 years. However, Thomas's infidelity with another woman led to the breakdown of their marriage. By 2021, they had split, and the lingering bitterness from their failed relationship would soon escalate into murder. As Thomas reconstructed his life and entered into a new relationship, he unknowingly sparked the wrath of a man he barely knew. That man was John Belfield, a former lover of the woman Thomas was now romantically involved with. When he learned of Thomas's new relationship, Belfield's anger turned to outrage. But what made this even more dangerous was the fact that Belfield had underworld connections. Belfield, known for grand-scale drug trafficking, was not just angry. He was cooking up something far worse. He messaged Colleen on Instagram, a friendly message becoming a sinister collaboration. Though they had a history, Colleen's anger at Thomas's cheating made her a willing accomplice in Belfield's plans. She was happy to assist him in his revenge. They chatted a great deal, with many phone calls and text messages in 7 days. They had been united by one thing: their hatred of Thomas. Colleen played a crucial role in the scheme, providing Belfield with precise information about where Thomas was, the number plate of his van, and even the precise times he would be in certain locations. The scheme was becoming more and more intricate, with Colleen providing Belfield with information about Thomas's day-to-day activities. She even gave Belfield details about his home, planning an attack. The initial attempt at ambushing Thomas was carried out on June 30th, 2022, a few days before the killing. The attackers intended to ambush him outside his house, but Thomas unknowingly evaded them. It was a failed operation but did not stop Belfield and his team. They refined their strategy, knowing that they would not let their chance slip. On July 2nd, 2022, at around 11 p.m., Thomas returned to his Mossley townhouse. He did not know that 3 men were waiting for him in the darkness. They were lying in wait. As Thomas went to his front door, the attackers jumped out. It occurred suddenly and was very violent. CCTV cameras caught on tape as Thomas was overpowered. The attackers pulled him inside, and then there followed 2 hours of atrocious torture. They did not want to steal from Thomas. They wanted to hurt him for everything he had done. They started off with brutal assaults, beating him, stabbing him, and kicking him. But the torture was worse. In an act of sadism, they poured boiling hot water over him. Thomas tried to fight as hard as he could, but it was too late. The attackers kept on beating him brutally. After the agony, his body was so battered that he could hardly be recognized. The attackers obtained what they wanted: drugs, money, and 2 Rolex watches that were never found. When they were done, Thomas was barely alive. In the early morning of July 3rd, they departed, making sure that they left no trace of their presence. They even destroyed the CCTV system in his house, removing any evidence that could be used to track them down. The following day, the neighbors were shocked to discover Thomas's body. His neighbors were frightened, and when the police came, everyone knew that this was not an ordinary crime. There were no traces that an intruder had left, but it was obvious that Thomas was targeted specifically. The investigation began immediately, and detectives soon discovered a terrible truth. This was not a robbery that had gone wrong. This was a premeditated murder. Only days following Thomas's body discovery, the first significant lead in the inquiry emerged. Police tracked a 25-minute phone call made just hours before Thomas was attacked, between Colleen Campbell and John Belfield, the suspected mastermind. This sparked instant doubts about Colleen's participation, particularly when investigators found texts she sent to Belfield, including information on Thomas's vehicle registration and home address. This crucial information let the conspirators follow Thomas's movements. CCTV footage revealed Colleen, Stephen Cleworth, and Reese Stephen talking about the placement of a tracker on Thomas's van as the inquiry progressed. Colleen was detained by July 13th. Her talk with Thomas's mother, Lynn, however, sparked more concerns. Colleen informed Lynn that during a psychic visit, Thomas's soul had come through and revealed information about his injuries, including how the lads assaulted his face. These details had not been disclosed, which raised doubt on whether only someone engaged in the crime could know them. Disturbed by what Colleen had said, Lynn immediately called the police. This conversation became a pivotal moment in the investigation, helping to confirm Colleen's involvement in the crime. The investigation became more serious, and the police immediately looked at Colleen. It was clear that her involvement in the conspiracy was more than anyone could have thought. She had talked to John Belfield hours after the murder of Thomas. Their phone records, video footage, and a tracking device in Thomas's van all pointed to her involvement. She was the one to give Belfield vital information that led to the attack. As more evidence came to light, the police began arresting the individuals involved in the conspiracy. 3 individuals were convicted of being involved in Thomas's murder by January 2023. Reese Stephen, involved in the torture and killing, received a life sentence with a minimum of 37 years. Stephen Cleworth, who fitted the GPS tracker on Thomas's van and assisted with planning, received a life sentence with a minimum of 12 years. Colleen Campbell, Thomas's former wife, was convicted of manslaughter and conspiracy to steal. She received a 13-year prison sentence, which shocked her own family due to the betrayal. But even while justice was served to these individuals, one of the primary criminals was still at large, John Belfield, the main criminal of the attack. Belfield had fled the country, and there was no way the authorities could catch him. But in March 2023, a turn of events occurred. Belfield was found living in hiding in Suriname, South America, and was arrested on suspicion of drug trafficking. After nearly a year in hiding, he was sent back to the UK in March 2024. His trial would then shortly begin, and the full extent of his involvement in the murder would then be revealed. The Campbell family went through a horrific experience. Thomas's children lost their parents. Their father was killed, and their mother was imprisoned. Witnessing their mother being a victim of such a vile crime would haunt them for the remainder of their lives. This was one of the worst crimes the police ever encountered. Detective Inspector Mark Davis, who had been a member of the law enforcement department for 23 years, described Thomas's killing as unimaginable. The police searched for hours and justice was achieved. However, even with 3 perpetrators of the crime found guilty, the case is far from over. John Belfield remains the central figure of the case, and as his trial approaches, more details of his role will be revealed. Healing will take years for Thomas Campbell's family, and even though justice has partially been served, the pain of losing a loved one so brutally will never be erased. Thomas Campbell's case is a case of revenge and betrayal, driven by emotions that got out of hand and resulted in violence that will forever hang over the perpetrators' heads. As this case continues, we can only hope that whoever was responsible for this tragic incident is brought to justice. For the Campbell family, their quest for justice will continue until all aspects are revealed and all those guilty are heard in court.
£200 million worth of cocaine, all secretly hidden in banana crates, stashed away in a London warehouse. This is the moment when the London Metropolitan Police raided Petco Jutev's warehouse in 2021. How did Petco manage to bring in such a massive load of drugs into the country, and how did the police find out about this drug lord? This is the story of one of the biggest drug hauls in UK history. On 14th February 2021, the border officials at Portsmouth seized a massive delivery of Colombian drugs, all of which were hidden conveniently in banana crates. The smugglers, members of an Albanian gang hidden in the UK, were supposed to receive the delivery in their warehouse in London. They thought the drugs would arrive undetected, but things didn't go their way. The port officials came across an unusual delivery of 41 pallets of bananas, weighing a staggering 2.3 tons. As per routine, the officers thoroughly examined the load, looking for any damaged or rotten fruit. Importing fruit requires licenses from the British authorities prior to shipment. Because of that, each consignment is checked before clearing from the port. And this is what puts the Albanian gang's business in trouble. The port officials checked every pallet, and 4 of them stood out. The banana crates had weird orange stickers on them, which the National Crime Agency or the port authorities had never seen before. This was the moment when suspicions arose. What did these stickers mean? There was only one way to find out. The authorities decided to open every crate in these pallets, and that is when they saw something that shook them to their core. 2,330 blocks of cocaine lying inside the crates, hidden under the bananas. The street value? Over £200 million. This was easily one of the biggest drug smuggling cases of all time. The authorities knew that tracing the smuggler through the manifest would be impossible. If the shipment didn't arrive and the police raided the warehouse instead, the gang members would flee in a split second. Therefore, a strategic and covert plan was to be executed. And then, 2 covert officers came up with a plan that was both dangerous and smart. They decided to pose as lorry drivers and deliver the banana shipment to the warehouse as intended. The only difference would be that instead of cocaine packets, the crates will be filled with more bananas. That way, no one would suspect that the shipment had been tampered with. It took the authorities 4 days to plan and execute their raid. They had no idea what to expect once they entered the warehouse. Dealing with a criminal who was bringing in £200 million worth of drugs into the UK, clearly meant that this wasn't an individual acting alone. Some larger gang or cartel was certainly behind it, and this only increased the danger. The smugglers could be waiting for the police with all kinds of guns and weapons. They could have rigged the warehouse. It was even possible that someone tipped them off about the raid beforehand. Anything could have gone down. Yet the police knew this case was too big to ignore or take lightly. Finally, on the 18th of February 2021, the covert officers hopped in 2 lorries full of banana crates and reached the warehouse in North London. Jutev took the delivery while his group members Eric Mucci and Olsia Beja unloaded the crates. Meanwhile, the police officers attempted to gain a glimpse of the warehouse and assess the entire situation. They were planning a raid in the next few hours, and understanding what to expect, including the amount of firepower they could face and the number of people inside, was crucial. When the covert officers returned, they conducted an internal database search on all 3 members of the group. Gheorghe Dico and Bruno Cucci were both criminals with deep ties to organized crime groups in London and other parts of the world. Jutev was the man who seemed to lead the operation, posing as the director of a food importation company called Agro Food Limited. Little did these criminals know that their identities were already exposed to the police, and so was their drug operation. The same day, on the 18th of February 2021, the police officers raided the warehouse just 2 hours after the delivery. The bust opened the door with full force, entering with weapons raised, ready to tackle any kind of retaliation from the gang members. The banana crates were still on the ground floor as if no one had touched them since the delivery. However, as the police made their way up to the first floor, they instantly saw what they knew was going to happen. The orange-stickered crates were shifted to the upper floor and opened. However, since they had already taken out the cocaine packets hidden inside, the crates were just lying there, with bananas scattered everywhere. 3 members, including Jutev, Cucci and Dico, were arrested on the spot. 2 other members, Olsia Beja and Eric Mucci, either ran away before the officers could put them in handcuffs, or they weren't at the warehouse. Nonetheless, it was a huge drug bust. The police continued to search the entire warehouse, trying to find any more evidence that would make the case stronger. They knew that a gang that could smuggle such a huge amount of cocaine certainly had some other illegal stuff going on too. And then, their suspicions turned into reality. Hidden in a ceiling girder above the banana crates was an unlicensed revolver with 6 bullets loaded. The case was busted wide open. For the smugglers, their worst nightmare had just come true. The Metropolitan Police caught the gang members red-handed, accepting a delivery of illegal drugs and having a weapon. It was just a matter of time before charges were pressed and the fate of these drug lords was sealed in a court of law. After the drug bust was successful, the National Crime Agency said that every drug packet had different branded stamps on them. These stamps were known to be affiliated with a known organised crime group that sold drugs on the streets of London and all across the UK. Over 2,000 kilograms of cocaine, a handgun, and 3 members of the gang were in police custody. There was absolutely no chance of any of these members getting away now, but the police weren't done just yet with their raids. National Crime Agency had more intelligence about other properties owned by these gang members, where more drugs could be found. During the questioning, they also learned about the other 2 members, Mucci and Beja, both Albanian nationals and key players in the organization. Surprisingly, Eric Mucci's name came up again and again since he was said to be the mastermind behind this drug-dealing operation. This made the police increasingly curious about who he was and where they could apprehend him. Finally, they came across some credible intel, likely from the arrested gang members, which led to his arrest. The police officers raided one of his properties on Caledonian Road, North London. When they entered the house, the police were met with a pleasant yet shocking surprise. 37 kilograms of cocaine were stashed away, all of which was already imported to London, likely by using the same banana import company front. The 3 arrested men were already in great trouble, but this additional 37 kilograms of cocaine put Mucci in an even tougher spot. For 2 years, the investigations continued. In October 2023, the police officers finally arrested Beja at an address in central London outside Agro-Foods. Mucci was also arrested just a month later in Hornchurch, East London. Finally, the raids were over. The police had enough evidence to put all 5 of them away for a long time. All that was left was to press charges and put them behind bars where they would await their trials. Jutev, the director of agro-foods, was charged with conspiring to import Class A drugs and possession of a firearm. Mucci was charged with conspiracy and intent to supply drugs, along with firearm offense charges. Ibeja and all the others were also charged with serious offenses, all of which guaranteed a long prison term. Almost 3 years after their operation was exposed, the court finally came to a decision. Diko had already pleaded guilty to firearms and ammunition offences at the Old Bailey in October 2021, and in April 2023, Cucci also pleaded guilty. Jutev also pleaded guilty to the conspiracy charges, admitting to being the leader in the importation process of these drugs. Mucci and Ibeja were still adamant that they were innocent. However, the police had tons of evidence, including their fingerprints on cocaine packages, text messages, and much more. During the trial, the jury declared them guilty. Finally, on December 3, 2024, the sentencing hearing took place. Judge Rebecca Troller sentenced Petko Jutev to 27 years behind bars. Mucci was awarded 26 years, but because of the additional 37 kilograms of cocaine, 7 more years were added to his sentence. Ibeja received 17 years while Cucci was given 20 years. The National Crime Agency said that this was one of the biggest drug hauls in UK history. These harsh sentences were said to be a message for criminals who are trying to flood the UK with drugs. In the words of Gemma Burns from Crown Prosecution Service, "We will not rest until you are convicted and behind bars." On the 26th of August 2024, the UK news channel's headlines featured a story about a drug smuggling operation led by a gang of Indian men who were sentenced to 80 years in prison. This wasn't because they were drug dealers. This sentence was carefully awarded because these gang members ran one of the most audacious smuggling and importing operations ever caught. This is the story of how a gang of Indian men managed to import drugs worth millions of pounds, all under the cover of frozen chicken. It all started in early 2020 when officers from the West Midlands Regional Organised Crime Unit began investigating unusual activities of a locally owned business. A meat import company received massive shipments of frozen chicken from overseas. However, their presence was very little. They had no brands, no marketing, and no pictures. What they did have were pallets and cartons full of frozen chicken, and with no brand, such huge loads were extremely suspicious. For a couple of months, the authorities kept a strict check on the chicken. It was extremely well packaged in cardboard boxes, wrapped with plastic, and even vacuum sealed. With regular deliveries of meat importers, this would be a routine thing. However, for a company that runs no ads, has no employee photos, or anything else that seemed legitimate, this was a tad too professional. So, in July 2020, the port authorities, along with the West Midlands Police, decided to conduct a deeper investigation. They checked the food trucks, meat pallets, itineraries, and invoices. Everything seemed to check out at first sight, but there were some dark secrets hidden within the chicken itself. When the police followed the money trail, accounts, and the communications between the importer and the receivers, that is when things started to unravel. The chicken business wasn't really a legitimate business at all. It was a front for a vast criminal network stretching from Birmingham to London. Their vans had hidden compartments, their cash flows were huge and suspicious, and all of their conversations were through encrypted phones. Only one question came to mind: what kind of poultry business has hidden compartments and uses encrypted phones? The police knew that something dark and dangerous was cooking behind this chicken business. They just didn't know what. The only way to find out was to conduct raids. However, it wasn't as simple as conducting a raid against a local street criminal. Finally, the police started a series of highly coordinated raids across the country. Birmingham, Sandwell, Wolverhampton, Walsall, and South Staffordshire were the key areas. Within just 10 days, the police apprehended and arrested at least 10 men, all connected directly to the frozen chicken operation. But how did the arrests take place? During the arrests, Maninder Dosanjh and Amandeep Rishi were stopped in a van in Birmingham on their way back from Essex. The van was loaded with chicken produce, but hidden inside it was 150 kilograms of cocaine. Similarly, Mohammed Usman, another gang member, was followed by the police to a place in the West Midlands where he collected wheels and tyres. He drove them straight to London and handed them over to Syed Hashiman in a residential area. The police confiscated these tyres, and when they were slashed open, nearly £500,000 fell out in cash. But this was just the beginning of an insane drug bust. The massive amount of cocaine gave the authorities a clear idea that these people weren't the average drug dealers. They were high rollers, flush with cash, and possibly had the backing of an even larger criminal organization. Within a few months, an irregular frozen chicken shipment became one of the most significant drug hauls in modern British history. Now, the police had a significant chunk of drugs. They knew the shipment routines and the cover. However, they had no idea about how big of an operation this was. Were cartels involved? Was it a relatively small-scale operation? Or was this drug ring being run by a massive shadow network right here in the UK? The answers to these questions were imperative, and there was only one way to get them: more raids and investigations. Within the next months, the police gathered as much intel as they could. Every piece of information was necessary because it could lead to piles of drugs, drug money, and maybe even unravel more dark secrets of the gang. That is when the police landed upon a gold mine. They raided a warehouse in Sutton Coldfield where 225 kilograms of cocaine was stored safely, all bound for Australia. This showed that the gang wasn't importing cocaine into the UK and just selling it here. They were actually running an international operation where they shipped the drugs from Mexico to all parts of the world. By now, 400 kilograms of cocaine, £1.6 million in cash, and 10 gang members were in police custody. It was a massive drug bust, and it made the national news. But the case wasn't over just yet. The police still had to determine their mode of communication and what encrypted app they used, which couldn't be tracked. This was the most imperative part because if the authorities could get their hands on this information, any number of other criminals and gangs could be dismantled, just like this frozen chicken gang was. Questioning, interrogations, plea deals, and everything else were ongoing. But the police had no idea of their mode of communication. Then, something finally caught their eye. During the searches and investigations, the authorities found a platform called EncroChat. As the name suggests, it was an encrypted platform for chatting, and the criminal used it extensively all across the globe. The main reason was that they believed the police authorities could not access this app, making it safe for their day-to-day criminal activities. And initially, they were right. The police had no idea about this platform or how to hack it. However, after these arrests, a massive UK-wide operation led to this platform being shut down. But they didn't shut down the platform without extracting each and every conversation from it. Thousands of messages were recovered, and among them were the chats of these 10 people. Management plans, logistics, deliveries of tons of cocaine, cash deliveries, and the entire ins and outs of their organization were discussed on EncroChat. Over £10 million worth of drugs were discussed in the conversations, all of which were either delivered, being collected, or to be collected from spots all across the country. Within just a few weeks, the entire case unraveled. While that happened, the gang members knew that everything they had going on was exposed. What hadn't been exposed yet would eventually come out too, because the authorities had access to everything. The bank accounts, conversations, dead drops, cash, cocaine, and even their warehouses and vehicles. Documents of their shipments were additional evidence of their crimes. In simple words, they knew that they were done. They were completely at the mercy of the police and the court. The police had gathered so much evidence against them that pleading not guilty was just a waste of their own time. That is when the gang members gave in. Between 30th March 2020 and 13th August 2020, they pleaded guilty to all the offences. Perhaps they thought that pleading guilty would gain them some sympathy from the court, but it did not. 4 years went by in legal battles, waiting for trial dates and investigations. Finally, on the 26th of August 2024, the Birmingham Crown Court passed the sentences of every gang member. Maninder Dosanjh, the man who was said to be the mastermind, received a sentence of 16 years and 8 months for supplying Class A drugs, money laundering, and conspiring to export these drugs from the UK. Amandeep Rishi was sentenced to 11 years and 2 months, whereas Mohammed Usman was sentenced to 9 years and 8 months. These were the key players of the organisation since they managed the logistics, imports, exports, and distribution of cocaine. But this didn't mean that the lower-level players were shown any mercy. Rizwan Ali, Kamran Hussain, Mandeep Singh, Mithab Hussain and Peter Masi, received prison sentences between 7 and 9 years. The shortest sentences was given to the money launderers, Ashtiaq Ahmed and Saeed Hashemian. Both of them were sentenced to 2 years and 7 months and 2 years and 3 months, respectively. News reporters, journalists, the police, and even the general public were left shocked by this drug bust because it was thought to be one of the biggest cocaine operations in the UK. The police said that this gang was possibly active for several years in the UK and successfully imported millions of pounds worth of drugs into the country. They had warehouses, they had a business to use as a front, they had specialized vans with hidden compartments, and most importantly, they had a completely secret, untraceable, and encrypted communication network. All of this made them extremely confident and allowed them to make millions of pounds in drug money. According to Detective Chief Inspector Pete Cook, this gang managed to stay under the radar for years. If they had not been caught in 2020, they probably would have expanded their drug operation into Australia and wherever else they could. And this is exactly what made this case the most interesting. The amount of drugs was mind-blowing, but the most insane part was the illusion they created. Nobody suspected frozen chickens to be laced with hundreds of kilos of cocaine. Nobody knows how many cocaine shipments they had received prior to being caught. And this illusion worked flawlessly for them for years. But today, all 10 gang members are sitting behind bars, serving the harsh sentences that they earned themselves.